Hi, my name is Tariq Nizami. I'd like to thank you for joining this presentation where we will discuss tips and tools on how to work with, understand, and support youth dealing with mental health issues. It's a privilege to have the Honorable Roger Chan and Dr. Gina Castro Rodriguez here to help guide us through this important subject. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gina Castro Rodriguez.
Thank you, Tariq. Great to be here today. Thank you so much for coming to our seminar. I am currently the Chief of Victim Services at the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. I oversee our work with victims of violent crime here in San Francisco, about 9,500 survivors a year. But today we're going to talk about something that's very important to me, which is how to work with, understand, and support young people who have mental health issues and are involved in the dependency and delinquency system. I've worked with young people for over 30 years, including 10 years as the founder and executive director of the Youth Justice Institute. And we've learned a lot about what goes on for young people, how they experience mental health issues, how they experience trauma, and what they need to do better. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about those tips and tools on juvenile mental health and behavioral health, and hopefully give you some insight into how to do the work that you do and how to support young people. So the agenda for today, I'm going to start with an overview of what is going on around mental health for juveniles that are involved in the system, some of the things that we see, some of the trends, some of the issues that we know about. I'm going to talk about the importance of screening, assessment, and treatment, and how we can do a better job at serving young people and helping to reduce the issues that are driving criminal behavior. I'm going to talk about effective engagement with juveniles and family members and how important it is to include the people that are important in young people's lives in their treatment, in their care, and in their support. I'm going to talk a little bit about important neurological and biological processes that we all go through and how to understand those so we don't misread them or misinterpret them when young people are displaying them, and instead we can help them. And then last, I'm going to touch on some de-escalation techniques. Sometimes working with young people can scare or concern adults because we're not sure what they have the capacity to do, and we don't want them to harm themselves or others. So there's really good information about what we can do to give young people the space and the empowerment that they need in order to manage their own behavior. And each of us can do that in our own roles every day. So let's just start with a big picture of what's going on for mental health issues and young people that are involved in the juvenile justice system. We know that 65 to 75% of young people, or about 2 million children and adolescents, are arrested each year in the United States, and they have a mental health disorder. So we know that we are engaging with young people with mental health issues in a system that's not really meant to treat those mental health issues, but instead is meant to address the behaviors that they're engaged in. And that's not the same thing as providing treatment for the reasons why they're engaged in that behavior. We have a lot of diagnoses that are used in the system, like conduct disorder, impulse control issues, mood, anxiety, trauma, substance use disorders. These are all really prevalent for young people involved in delinquency and dependency systems. About a third of the youth, or 30% of the youth, have dual diagnosis, so more than one diagnosis. Typically, that's a mental health issue and maybe a substance use disorder or two mental health issues. We know that more significant needs are also out there for young people, like psychiatric disorders that affect their ability to engage in their normal function of going to school or having relationships or controlling their behavior. And some of these psychiatric disorders include schizophrenia, delusional disorder, bipolar disorder, or obsessive compulsive disorder. And these can be really debilitating for young people if they're not addressed and treated. And then we know we have neurodevelopmental disorders like intellectual disabilities or attention deficit hyperactivity, or young people that are on the autism spectrum. And these are issues that can be managed with support and treatment and resources. But unfortunately, a lot of young people, particularly those that are involved in systems, are not getting the support that they need. And then finally, when mental health issues emerge during childhood and adolescence, there are particular needs for those young people at different stages in their development. And we really need to keep evaluating both the assessment and the treatment we're providing young people throughout their developmental stages, so we make sure that we're giving them sort of the optimal resources and supports as they grow and learn to manage and negotiate the kinds of challenges that they're facing, and that those negotiations and challenges don't turn into frustration and contribute to behaviors that get them involved in systems. So the first thing, it's really important is screening. You know, when we screen young people, we find out really valuable information, like the amount of violence that they've been exposed to, or the amount of abuse that they've endured, or the rifts in their relationships, or the challenges that they faced in their family. And all of that information is really important for us to know how to help them get to a more stable place, how to help them, give them the tools so they can help themselves to be the best young person that they can be. So assessment is incredibly important. And when we do assessment, we need to be using measures that are validated for the young people that we're serving, so that these are tools that are validated to work with young people, to work with young people of color, to work with kids at different developmental ages, kids with different needs. It's really important that we accurately are looking at the intensity of their diagnosis, the symptoms that they're experiencing, the impact that their diagnosis is having on their daily life. So those screens have to be done in a way that help us understand and give us information to provide treatment to the young people. Once we have that information, then we need to match the treatment with the young person. You know, our system, unfortunately, looks at it the other way. We have a treatment and we're trying to match we're trying to make the young person fit into that treatment. And really what we should be doing, because we have lots of treatment options, is trying to find out what is the best support for this young person, what's going to work given their diagnosis, what's going to work given their symptoms, what's going to work given their resources and their reality, whether it's the configuration of their family or the relational resources or financial resources that they have, or even their capacity to engage in service at different times. And that match is really important, because too often we blame the young person for failing treatment when it's really the treatment that failed the young person. And then the last thing I want to talk about on this slide is issues of special consideration. You know, every young person is unique, and they have a unique way of both expressing what's going on for them, but also for experiencing what's going on with them with their mental health needs. And anxiety can look different for different people. Depression looks different for different people. And we really need to be looking at things like gender and gender identity and sexual identity and ethnic identity and composition of family and community, because those things are really important. They can be very big protective factors and risk factors when we're looking at treatment for a young person, and we need to know that as we're working with them. Right now, I run a program for 18 to 24-year-olds where we go in and assess not just the risk factors, which we tend to focus on a lot. What are the things that are getting in the way of this young person being successful, but also what are the protective factors? What are the things that this young person has internally and externally that will allow them to be a participant in their own treatment, in their own recovery? And how do we maximize those things rather than negating them or not integrating them into their treatment? How do we maximize that and really make that part of helping them to get better? There's just a couple of things to point out here, that youth of color are less likely to receive treatment in the community. We know that from many studies. Boys are less likely to receive treatment referrals, and girls are actually better at following up with treatment, but they're also overdiagnosed. And for kids that are identifying their sexual or their gender identity or understanding who they are, they can be more at risk for internalized disorders, because they often don't think that other people will understand them or will be able to engage with them and be open about what they're learning about themselves and how they're expressing themselves. And so they often don't seek help. So those are really important things for us to pay attention to. So we're going to talk about some effective engagement strategies with juveniles and family members. Rather than just talking about one or two treatment options, it's really important for us to talk about what are the strategies that are important when we're doing treatment with young people. The first is psychoeducation. Young people need to know what's going on with them and how we actually know a lot about symptoms that may seem strange to them or may seem like unique, that they're the only ones that are experiencing it. But these are sort of the normal symptoms associated with something abnormal. So, for instance, trauma symptoms. We know that people could have problems with sleep. People can have re-experiencing of the trauma in multiple ways, including nightmares or flashbacks. We know that there can be avoidance, where young people feel like they want to avoid anything that will remind them of the event or re-trigger the event for them. These are all normal symptoms in this abnormal situation of having experienced trauma. And when we talk to young people, it takes away some of the charge and the stigma that they're feeling internally, because they think something's wrong with them and they think they're the only ones that are going through it. So when we explain it through psychoeducation, we actually help them get some ownership in their own treatment and their own experience, and understand that there are things that we can do to help them get better. Parental involvement. Sometimes this can be difficult to do, but a family is a unit. Whether there's dysfunction, whether there's health there, whether there are challenges or protective factors, a family is a unit that will try to stay together through good and bad times. And if we don't address the entire unit, we only do part of the work, and that young person has to go back to that unit and try to negotiate it, even if they've made change. So it's really important that we provide support to the whole unit. And that's whatever configuration they live in, whether that's mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or cousins or whoever lives in the home. It's really important that everyone is on the same page about trying to improve outcomes for young people. We want to have availability. We need to make it easy for young people to access mental health care. When you make it hard, I mean, young people, it's already hard enough to do things that they don't want to do. And that's part of their normal developmental cycle, that they're going towards things that make them feel good, towards things that give them rewards, and trying to avoid things that don't feel good and things that they don't want to do. So we want to work with that developmental stage, and we want to make things easy and accessible for them. And we also want to be, we want to be mindful that what's accessible and easy for an adult is very different than what's accessible and easy for a young person. And that we're not creating services and treatment for adults, we're creating it for young people, and that we really need their input in what will help them engage. We want to have lots of treatment options. If we only have one treatment option and it is norm to work with a small segment of the population, then it's not just that the other people that fall out of that range don't get services. It's that, sometimes these are very high stakes for them. It could mean incarceration. It could mean out-of-home placement. It could mean further involvement in the juvenile justice system. So we need more options for young people, because people respond to different kinds of treatment. People engage in different kinds of things, and we need to have a variety of ways for young people to improve their mental health. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how they get there. It just matters that they get there. So we have to have lots of options for them. And we want to mitigate barriers that we know about young people. We want to explore the barriers that we don't know. So we want to be practical about transportation and fees, providing services in their own language. Using interpreters is sometimes a necessity. It is not ideal for working with young people in trying to help them understand what's going on for them psychologically and getting treatment. So when we do that, we add another barrier for them and another milestone or another barrier for them to try to overcome in order to get better. We want to think about cultural competency. Who's providing the services? What do they know about working with diverse young people? What do they know about people's experiences? This is really important, because that's one of the first hurdles young people get past is, do you see me? Do you understand me? Are you like me? That's really what we're doing in adolescent development, is trying to find our people. And we have to do this in mental health also. Also, we have to acknowledge that there is, stigma and fear and concerns about privacy, and they may not have had good experiences with mental health, particularly, if it's been something that they've engaged in or their family members have engaged in. And it's our job to get past those stigmas and fears, because what we're going to do and what we want to do is really important, but we also have to acknowledge that those things are very real for people. We also want to have realistic expectations. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a young person and, 6 weeks into treatment, someone's asked if everything is better now, or, or a parent has said things haven't changed yet. Look, these behaviors and these decisions get there slowly, and changing it takes time, and building trust takes time. And so we have to have realistic expectations about not only what the treatment will be able to provide, but how we're going to get there and how long it will take. And then the last thing, just working with any young people, we constantly have to remind ourselves that positive reinforcement is stronger than negative reinforcement. That young people are discovering who they are, and they're trying to find what they're good at and find where they feel like they fit in. And we can contribute to that by giving them positive reinforcement when they're making good decisions, or even making steps towards good decisions, or working towards change, or trying things out, because that's how they get to success, is to have small little achievements on their way to getting to a larger achievement. And that's absolutely the job of mental health providers, but it's not often seen as something that we should be doing. I'm going to talk a little bit just about what's going on neurologically for young people. So you've probably heard by now a lot of research that we have about the adolescent brain continuing to develop until about the end of the 24th year. So we have lots of verification that is absolutely what is happening, and that the brain actually has the capacity to continue developing all the way through life until the end of life. But for young people, they are in one of the most rapid periods of development between the ages of 12 or 13 and 24 that we're going to go through in our entire life. The only other period that is comparable is right after birth. A child is born with 100 billion neurons in their brain, and those neurons are going to start making the connections right away through experience. Well, when an adolescent is between the ages of, say, 12 and 24, they're starting to have capacity to engage in lots of experiences that they weren't able to before. And that's because another part of their brain is further developing, the front part of the brain, or the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe of our brain is the executive function part of the brain, the part of the brain that allows us to make decisions and set goals and put things in a hierarchy, and weigh information, and start or stop a behavior, or consider other people's feelings, or gauge people's reactions. Those are really higher order thinking processes that adolescents are beginning to come into the ability to understand and to integrate into their behavior, to their decision making, to their everyday relationships. And it's really important that we understand that capacity is both a challenge and a benefit to them. So the challenge is that when they're starting to have that higher order of thinking, that part of the brain is really reacting to things that put them a little bit at risk, like their reward center of their brain is very active during that time. They are going towards things that make them feel good. They're trying to actually ignite that feeling of feeling competent, of feeling powerful, of feeling loved. And so they're going to go towards things that make them feel that way. It can be good things, but it can also be bad things. The second thing is that during that development, they're starting to understand what they have capacity for, but because they don't have experience yet, and because they don't have context yet, sometimes they overestimate their capacity to make a decision, or the capacity to manage a process, or engage in something that maybe they really don't have the experience to, but it feels like they have that power. And so they're trying it out. They're trying out being adults. So those things are both risks and protective factors for them. And we just need to know that that's where they are, and that that's normal. And we work within that capacity, that they're able to, think in this higher order. They're able to have relationships. They're able to use their internal capacity to discover who they are. They're able to engage in the world, but they need a little bit of assistance still. They might look like they're adults, but they're still learning that stuff, and they're still practicing it. So we need to still provide support and help around that. The second thing I want to point out is that our bodies react to trauma and to fear, and mostly in the same way. Most of us have the exact same experience. So you've probably heard of fight or flight, mating side of our central nervous system. It's the part of our brain that is protecting us when something is dangerous out there. So there's a process that goes on that's called the HPA axis. It's the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal gland axis. These are the mechanisms in our body that allow us to activate and be energized in order to protect ourselves if we're in danger. So what's happening, the amygdala in the brain is sort of like a danger detector. It's reading the danger that's out in the world. So it's taking in information, sensory information. What do you see? What do you feel? What do you smell? What do you taste? And analyzing that information and determining if we're safe or if we're not safe. And if the amygdala feels like we're not safe, it's going to get the body prepared to protect us. So what it does is it tells the hypothalamus, which controls our endocrine system, sends blood and energy to all of our muscles and to our extremities, starts and stops processes like things like hunger or urination. It will tell the body, focus on the things that we really need right now, which is energy to our muscles in order to protect ourselves, and don't focus on the other things like, that we're hungry or we're thirsty or we want to have sex or we have to go to the bathroom. Those things are not necessary when you're in danger. So it's going to draw attention away from that and put all the attention in our ability to protect ourselves and give ourselves the ability to run or fight if we need to in order to survive. So when this system is activated, what it does is it tells the adrenal glands over our kidneys, release cortisol, release epinephrine, release norepinephrine. These are all activating chemicals that will give us that ability to run away or defend ourselves or move something out of the way if we need to. And that's a good thing if something is really dangerous. That's a good thing if there's a bear in front of you. That's a good thing if there's someone dangerous in front of you. The problem for young people who are exposed to violence over and over again is that this system activates over and over again, and it becomes dysregulated. It starts to kick in even when the person is no